and proud Tampa Catholic graduate. We are of Horns247.com. Please feel free to like and subscribe to the Horns247 YouTube channel. If you're feeling it, we appreciate that. Helps us grow. Feel free to leave us a 5-star rating if that's something that you have in your heart. And listen, spring football has come to a conclusion. My man Eric Henry was down in H-Town hanging out with Steve Sarkisian at the Touchdown Club of H-Town. He will enlighten you about all of that, and we will give you our thoughts on Texas spring football and what shape the Longhorns are in heading into summer workouts. Well, a little time off first in May. And, Steve Sarkisian always says, I get a little nervous in May. Texas didn't even make it to May, and they had a little off-season headline. We'll get into that. But Texas baseball, still number one. Again, guys are dropping like flies. Injured Jared Spencer, Jonah Williams, although Jonah Williams should be back today, as a matter of fact. We're, full disclosure, recording on Thursday, May 1st. Texas is in Fayetteville to take on former number one Arkansas baseball. We'll get into that. Texas softball, Lincoln Oil a little bit last weekend up in Norman. And, feel free to comment if you're watching us on the YouTube channel. We'll get into your questions, comments as well. Eric, how you doing, my man?
Chip Brown, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday to all of y'all rocking with us, as Chip said. Watching live on YouTube, watching live on the Horns247 Twitter page if you're watching there. And we got Facebook reconnected. So if you're watching live on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, we work on everything. You might even catch us on TikTok. Chip Brown might make his debut on TikTok sooner than later. That's in the works. I don't think Mr. Brown even knows about that. So that could be in the near future. But I'm doing well, sir. Cannot complain.
What part of this doesn't say TikTok,
Listen, I who am I to give you crap about TikTok, Chip? Because I am 33. I am above the TikTok demographics. So it's both of us in the same boat, all right? Nevertheless. But no, always good, to learn a new trick, right? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, we are here, a pair of old dogs trying to learn new tricks in the form of TikTok. But no, like I said, Texas spring winding down, now completed. Got a chance to hear from the head ball coach, Steve Sarkisian. His address at TD Club of Houston kind of marks, as you well know, Chip, kind of marks that official start of summer conditioning. So a lot that came out of that in terms of what the plan is for the Horns over the next few months, some positions that he is happy he's been able to bolster, and just general state of college football. Talked about Quinn Ewers, talked about a myriad of things, but I'm doing well, Chip. Cannot complain.
Well, what would you say is the overall tone? What's your sense of Steve Sarkisian's overall feel? Because it was a different kind of spring for Texas football compared to the last couple of years, primarily because Texas was veteran in the offensive and defensive lines. And this year, they've got veterans. They're just inexperienced. And on the defensive line, they've imported some veterans via the transfer portal, some of whom haven't even arrived on campus yet. Eric, what was your sense of Steve Sarkisian overall about where Texas football is coming out of spring?
Chip, listen, I'm entering my third year on the beat, right? So I've been to two. That was my second TD Club of Houston address. This is my overall takeaway. And just bear with me for a moment. I would have to defer to you on what the tone of that conversation was like following the 5 and 7 year, right? I would imagine the tone was very different than what it was. And Steve kind of alluded to it, that the tone of his message to the Texas faithful, Texas boosters, was different this time around. But what I noticed, Chip, and kind of comparing, contrasting the two TD Club of Houston addresses that I've been a part of, obviously 2023 going to 2024, that was the first real sign of high level success, right? Not talking about 8-win Alamo Bowl, but high level success competing for a college football playoff. The tone of that message, that address, was the obsession, right? Like we talked about that, being obsessed with winning a national title, wanting to keep this thing going. It felt like Steve was very hyper focused on, all right, we've done it once. We need to make sure this thing doesn't slide backwards, keep this train moving. I want to be very careful. I'm not saying that Steve Sarkisian sounded complacent, but I think it's just what I took from it. It sounded a little more of a, all right, we've got this thing rolling in the way that I envision it would be rolling. Now, what do we need to do to continue to keep this thing rolling? What do we need to do to, keep ourselves out of the headlines, as you alluded to? And I'm sure you'll talk about it. The headline with Nick Brooks, right? Actually, ironically, was broken that day of Steve Sarkisian's address to the TD Club of Houston. What do we need to do to keep our nose clean? What do we need to do from a perspective of player responsibility, right? Not even talking about off-field stuff. I'm talking about the month of May, as Steve Sarkisian referred to it, as it's open gym, right? How do we develop the leaders that if they see a kid who's saying, all right, yeah, I won't work out today, right? That veteran leader is going to say, hey, we need to be in here, right? Like that type of personal responsibility. That was the tone of his messaging, that like, okay, we've now done this 2 straight years, come one game away from playing for a national title. How do we, in terms of building that leadership, keeping that infrastructure, keep that thing going, as opposed to kind of does that make sense, Chip? It's a different type of focus, right? When you're coming off of a 12-win year and we want to go repeat that, versus, okay, we now are starting to make this a trend, make this a habit. How do we keep the train rolling in that sense?
Yeah, and he talked about the veterans, the juniors, who are Arch Manning, Anthony Hill, and their hunger to win. And look, this is a talented Texas roster. Arch Manning, Anthony Hill Jr., 2 of the most high-profile players at their positions. Anthony Hill, unbelievable year last year, should have won the Butkus. Like, if you look at his numbers were better than the other Butkus finalists. He wasn't even a finalist. It's like, what happened here? His numbers were comparable with the guys competing for the Nagurski, the best player on defense in college football. But you've got really talented guys. They got to fill in around them. And I think Texas did a good job of that in the transfer portal, especially in the spring, Eric. They ended up with 5 defensive tackles, which is the gold bullion of college football. They're the hardest things to find. A difference-making defensive tackle can be as important to a team. It helps to have 2 of them, but it can be as important to a team as a successful quarterback on offense. So it is interesting that spring football was sort of a depth finder in a lot of ways, because you have all these newcomers. You got 27 newcomers. You had 5 transfers, 22 early enrollee freshmen, 21 really if you count Jonah Williams, who was full-time baseball, but did observe some practices, was in some meetings, met with Dwayne Akina, and has a feel for what's going on there. And that was part of the reason there was no spring game. Steve Sarkisian wanted all these newcomers, all the new coaches on his staff, to get to know each other. They were practicing on one field for the most part. And so this was a time for everybody to get on the same page and build. And like, we didn't have a lot of incredible headlines coming out of the receiver position. Well, that's in large part because Ryan Wingo was not taking part in a lot of spring ball. DeAndre Moore didn't take part in really much of any spring football because of his foot injury. So you're developing these young guys. You're kind of, drinking out of a fire hose if you're Jamie French and Khalil Lockett and Michael Terry. We heard a lot of good things about Parker Livingstone. I can't leave out Dalen McCutcheon either, because Dalen McCutcheon got a lot of praise. The early enrollee freshman who played for Todd Dodge at Lovejoy last year. But the tight end position, Amari Winston. A lot of talk about Amari Winston because Jordan Washington was out with an injury, and you had Spencer Shannon in there, but now you're bringing in Jack DeVries, who's coming in from, or Jack Endries, coming in from Cal, and so it feels like there was depth building, depth finding. Who are the guys who looks like we can really push over the summer to maybe get into the 2 deep, who might surprise us and do it on their own. But it wasn't the complete feel, as you said, Eric. When Steve Sarkisian was at the Touchdown Club of Houston the last couple of years, he was like, yeah, we see ourselves as competing for conference championship and a national championship. I'm obsessed with winning a national championship. And when I win one, I'm going to want 2. And the crazy thing, Eric, is Texas's short yardage and red zone goal line offense has been a major stumbling block for Texas each of the past 3 years. And that's, Texas fans don't want to hear that. They don't even want to think about it because it's sort of popped up at the worst possible times. But look, Steve Sarkisian's saying Arch Manning's athletic. We need to lean on his athleticism, which is something we've not really heard him say out loud about any of his quarterbacks, certainly not Quinn Ewers, who we'll get into, the draft of 12 Longhorns. But, so Eric, it's kind of a different feel coming out of the spring. But what are your thoughts overall on where this Texas football team is? Maybe an area that you're feeling they're strong in, and an area that maybe there's still a lot of work to do.
If I had to choose one area that I believe the team is strong in, and listen, I think there's a lot of talent across the board, right? Chip, this is the year, and anytime I'm asked kind of a version of this question, I say that there are more ifs than surefire knows about this team, right? When I say ifs, I'm referring to if the player can reach said potential. If, right? We're not talking about, for example, you walk into 2023 with a Jalen Ford. That's not an if, right? Your Mike linebacker, the level of play, you kind of have an idea what that ceiling could be, but what the floor is too. Right now, you're dealing with a lot of positions that you don't necessarily know what the floor is, and you're hopeful that the ceiling is what you kind of think it can be. That's where the if comes in. There's one position that I feel most confident right now. It has to be defensive tackle. I know you'll probably see people roll their eyes and say, well, how can you say that they added a bunch of transfers? For as strong as I feel about the linebacker room, and I feel like the linebacker room, honestly, is the most established room on this team, you're knock on something, an injury from an Anthony Hill away, an injury from a Leonard Lafau away from having to be in that if situation with a Ty Anthony Smith. Yes, Brad Spence, of course, had a very good game against Texas, 7 tackles, a sack and a half or 2 sacks, if memory serves me correct, last year. But he hasn't been a full-time starter, Chip, as you know, right? He was not a full-time starter last year at Arkansas. Then you kind of get into that if category. I look at defensive tackle. You get Murad Watson, came in from Syracuse, freshman All-American, was a starter. You get Cole Brevard, was a starter last year at Purdue, has played more or less starter level snaps for the past 2 years. You get Travis Shaw. Travis is still somewhat of an if because, you got to see what's the situations with the knee, with his weight, but at least he's played a lot of football. From a depth perspective, Chip, I think you have to feel great, right? Hero Kanu is probably the biggest if, right? Again, I've said this before. I'll say it again. This is entering his 6th year. This year is going to make his 6th year of playing football overall, right? So there's still an if in terms of him learning the game. But you get a Levon Johnson, right, from Maryland. At least now I look at that and I say, okay, if, to use that buzzword, there is an injury, I at least know I have 2, 3. You throw in Alex January, who, again, didn't play a ton, right? But someone you feel is on an upward trajectory. He's coming. You at least feel like, all right, we got something back there, right? Linebacker, while I think it's the strongest position on the team, that's still if an injury happens, you see what happens. Now, you ask me position, I'm still kind of thinking what this may be. I may surprise you, right? I could point to running back. I could point to offensive line. And I think those are legitimate positions. You can say, how are we kind of quarterback? It's not that we don't believe, or I'll speak for me. It's that I don't believe that Arch Manning is capable of all the things, right? But Chip, I think now, and this is what, my 3rd year of covering Arch Manning, right? In some form or fashion. It's almost impossible to talk about him without getting into a hyperbolic nature, right? When he came in and played well against UTSA, okay, is he the front runner for the Heisman? Entering his 1st year as a starter. All right, is Arch going to be the number 1 pick in the 2026 NFL draft, which Chip has continuously reported that doesn't necessarily, not some foregone conclusion that he's going to be out, one and done at Texas. And Steve Sarkisian was asked that question. Chip, forgive me for not sending you. I only sent you the media portion. I should have sent you the Q&A with fans. He was asked that question, right? Like, what's kind of the situation with Arch? And Steve said, well, we hope that he has a real tough decision to make at the end of the year, right? Which would mean he played well. But to get back to my answer, you're still talking about a first-time starting quarterback, right? The ceiling is through the roof for Arch. But you kind of wonder where that floor is, right? So quarterback, everything runs through quarterback. That to me is the biggest question mark. Not question mark in terms of lack of talent or how could this play out, but we still need to see more than 3 games, right? So that to me is like everything runs through the quarterback.
Yeah, and there's cohesion that needs to happen on that offensive line, how everything fits. The chemistry between quarterback and receiver. Emmett Mosley V, the Stanford transfer, will get here in June. And he could be a starter. Never caught a pass from Arch Manning, probably. I mean, I don't know what he was doing on his official visit, but yeah, so there's a lot that has to come together in fall camp that we haven't seen on the field as a productive, with productive examples of the previous season. We don't have those. And so good for Steve Sarkisian to bring in the coaches he brought in, from Dwayne Aquina to Chad Scott at running back, Mark Orfe, Neil Brown serving as a special assistant, Alan Clark, Jason McIndoe. Steve Sarkisian is going for it. I think that's one thing we can say after looking at what Texas ended up doing in the transfer portal in the spring with Jack Endries, Emmett Mosley V at receiver, the defensive tackle position. You mentioned Murad Watson and Levon Johnson, and then Mason Shipley, which I heard the second to last scrimmage was a disaster for the Kickers. And that was pretty much the end of the line for Jeff Banks and saying, okay, we're going and getting a guy. So, Mason Shipley will come in having hit 31 of 35 field goals over 3 seasons at Texas State. Can he do it in front of 100,000 with a game on the line at Florida? We'll see. Eric, a couple things about I wrote in the Insider because there was a story that went viral about Texas. I think the tweet for the story was Texas will spend 35 to 40 million on its football roster in 2025. So I talked to a bunch of sources, and that is not the case. So quick background, our own John Talty of CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports, wrote a great story that everybody needs to read, interviewing Curt Cignetti, the Indiana coach, who said he thinks the high end for roster finance will be $40 million. And he put Texas and Oregon and Ohio State in that category, put Texas Tech in that category. But he doesn't know, he's speculating. Well, then, comes an article, Texas is spending 35 to 40 million. Okay. Slow down. Because I think in talking to, the sources I spoke with, they take a lot of pride. And I think Steve Sarkisian has taken a lot of pride in not just going and spending to get guys, but finding guys who want to win, want to be a part of Texas, want to, see themselves fitting in and being part of a culture that's already established, and not, bringing in a guy who's going to break the bank and cause a ripple effect or disruption in a locker room where you've recruited a lot of guys out of high school who are on the rise. And Steve Sarkisian has said, if you come here, perform well, you're probably going to do better in NIL. So I think that's just important to lay out there because it feels like that story went viral and everyone's saying, oh, Texas is spending crazy money to win it. And yes, there is this, what we call double dip effect happening right now, because you've got rev share coming. We think, we're waiting for Claudia Wilken, the federal judge in the NCAA versus House case, to ratify that settlement. But the feeling is there will be $20.5 million in rev share for student athletes. I'm told Texas will spend about 13.5 of that for football. And then, $3 million for men's basketball and less than that for women's basketball and baseball. And then about $2.5 million for all the other sports, volleyball, softball, tennis, golf. And so there probably has been a rush by some schools to load up from the portal before that settlement gets ratified, so that those deals are not part of the new Deloitte clearinghouse that will review every NIL deal over $600 starting whenever this settlement is announced. But there are Texas officials who say Texas Tech has spent more on its football roster in 2025 than Texas has. So just want to put that out there, because I think that kind of became a runaway freight train. And Eric, if you have any thought on that, please, chime in, or we can move over to.
I'll be quick, right? And I'm not saying this to contradict any reporting that you've done. Let's just call the number 30 and try and precise here for a second, right? Because as you talked about with the settlement, I never thought that all $20 million is going to go to one sport, right? It's obviously not how that works. Chris Conte has a ton of sports. He's got to fund, and guess what? A ton of successful programs. That would be a very hard conversation to go to, Mike White or whoever else and be like, yeah, hey, tough, right? So let's call the number 13.5. I'm willing to entertain an idea that maybe through Texas One Fund, just as a whole, and then kind of the collective structure, let's just call the number 17, right? That may be high, but for all intents and purposes of this discussion, we'll call it 17. So I'll just call it $30 million for a second. Chip, to your point, I think a lot of people, the sticker shock is what kind of made that thing go viral, right? In conjunction with, it's Texas, right? Then it's, Texas is just buying this, that, and the other. This is my feeling on it. You think Texas is the only program that's out here trying to spend money to win championships? I saw, and listen, I'm not throwing shade at, and trying to be a good teammate here, but there was a tweet from a member of the Bucknuts crew over there at Ohio State 247 that said, it doesn't take $40 million to field a competitive roster. Well, no one said it takes $40 million. But guess what, Chip? I'm a Tampa Bay Rays fan. If my Rays could have the money that the New York Yankees had to field a competitive roster, I would take the money. So the idea that poor little Ohio State or poor little Oregon or whoever else, we just can't afford to play in the field with Texas. Again, let's just call number 30 for a second. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just trying it on for size. That's laughable, guys. Come on. So regardless of what it is, right? And I think to the substance of what Chip is saying, to keep a cohesive locker room, right? Like you kind of need, you can't have, one guy making $3 million and then maybe that player doesn't perform. And then you've got, an issue there, right? So I understand from that perspective, you need to keep the cohesion of the locker room. But something that also helps is, and we've talked about this, and we'll talk about it in Take It or Leave It, they've had quarterbacks, Chip, the highest paid position that do not have to take collective money. Quinn Ewers, for a myriad of reasons, didn't have to take collective money. Arch Manning doesn't have to take collective money. Diabell down the road, should he be the starting quarterback because of his background, won't have to take collective money, right? So those things do help in terms of just kind of, putting a little more substance to Chip's point. If you don't have to spend, let's just call the going rate $3 million, or I guess 4 is the reported number for Carson Beck, right? If you don't have to spend it on a quarterback, well, then you can kind of fill out your roster in more cost-efficient ways, right? So again, let's just call the number 30. I'm not reporting it, just trying to offer size. That would sound about right, given, A, you are getting the rev share money. This is not Texas coming up with $30 million on their own, right? The collectives. And B, you have other ways that you can put together your roster because I don't know what the college way to put it is, Chip. Like they're not like penny pinching at quarterback. They're being efficient in that they're getting quarterbacks who have other ways to fund their salary, Chip.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a layered conversation. And Kurt, again, read the John Talty story that came out on April 23rd. Just Google Curt Cignetti, the Indiana coach, and John Talty. It's a great story. And Curt Cignetti is very candid because, he's trying to compete, and there's only a handful that can really compete at that highest level. Texas is one of them. I think the point in talking to the Texas sources is, yeah, we can compete at that level, but we're not spending like that. We kind of take pride and we evaluate guys. We find guys who've been on losing teams who want to be on a winner or who feel like they can be developed as an offensive player into an NFL player by coming to Texas. Look, they're spending, don't get me wrong. And I think Eric's right. I mean, I wrote in the Insider, the number probably is closer to 30 million than 35 or 40 million, but that 10 million is a lot. And so, I think the point was from the Texas sources I talked to is, hey, we're not the top of the market here. Let's not act like we're the Yankees out here spending, in fact, I was told no player has in part because Texas Tech signed the Bailey kid, David Bailey, the rush end.
Okay.
Allegedly for $2.5 million for the 2025 season. I'm told Texas has never paid any student athlete $2 million for a single season. Now, I think there might be one or two that's close on this year's roster. One of whom's name we've already mentioned on the show. Who is a dominant defensive player, but nonetheless, they don't consider themselves the top of the market. All right, Eric, let's real quick on Nick Brooks, the freshman offensive tackle. He gets pulled over. So spring football ends on Saturday, and then early morning Sunday, he's pulled over for speeding. This is all according to the arrest affidavit, Austin police. And one thing leads to another, and there's discussion about a a weed pen, and suddenly he's, arrested, charged with driving while impaired. He was not drunk. According to the arrest affidavit, he took a breathalyzer and blew 0.0. So we'll see how this plays out. Steve Sarkisian has put out a statement saying, we're aware of this. We're on top of it. We'll deal with it internally when the legal process plays out. Any thoughts on that before we go to the NFL draft?
Yeah, Chip, I'll be quick, and I guess I should preface this by saying the comments here are those of Eric Henry, not those of Chip Brown or 247 Sports. It's a learning experience for the young man. He's 18, 19 years old. First semester, finishes up his first spring practice right on campus. He's having a little fun. As Chip mentioned, there are things you can read in the arrest affidavit. I believe what I'm reading here is from the Austin American Statesman. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but they talk about, the details of the sobriety test and the breathalyzer going 0.0, but quote unquote, failing the field sobriety test, and so on and so forth. And Nick Brooks talking about, this is the things that UT players do, right? And entertaining recruits and so on and so forth. This is where the commentary here is strictly me. All right. Please don't be shocked by any of that. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it's because, I have a South Florida background and I've seen and heard things. I hope there's no repercussion or shock value there with some of the commentary that Nick Brooks. You're talking about a young man who's probably dealing with the cops for the first time in his life. Is nervous as all hell, right? And is just talking, right? Validity or no validity, even if what he said is true, that's not some crime. That stuff happens, okay? Also, and this is another part where, again, I will say, this commentary of me, kids, no good comes from running your mouth more when in that scenario. So just take your breathalyzer and say nothing else. Okay, that would be my advice, because then stuff like that then becomes a story that we're now talking about. But again, Chip, I look at this, I think it's a non-story in my mind. Once you saw the details in terms of a vape pen, and I'm not here preaching about what you should or shouldn't do or shouldn't be offended by, but this isn't a young man who, because of the statute here in Texas, right? Like that's what you be charged with, DWI. And I know, again, sticker shock with the headline, you see 6'7", 350 something. How much did he drink? Right? Well, he didn't drink anything. So that's where I fall on that, Chip.
Yeah. Well said. All right. The NFL draft happened over the weekend, and the record now is 12 Longhorns drafted. And Eric, you got Matt Golden going to Green Bay, Gunnar Helm going to the Tennessee Titans, Alfred Collins going to the San Francisco 49ers, Vernon Broughton getting drafted by his old defensive line coach, Bo Davis, with the New Orleans Saints, and Quinn Ewers, falls to the 7th round. I'm told it was really the injury history that scared teams off, because it happened every year. He's a little bit slight in stature, but Eric, if Quinn Ewers has money. I'm told from a source I trust he earned about $6 million in NIL in his 3 years at Texas. I get it. You're not getting drafted maybe in the round you were hoping or expecting, but the Miami Dolphins, you being a Florida guy, I don't know if there's too many better situations to land in, where you've got Tua Tagovailoa and Zach Wilson as the quarterbacks in Miami right now. And you get to go to Miami, warm weather, and learn from Mike McDaniels, who runs an offense similar to Steve Sarkisian. And that's a pretty good spot.
Yeah, Chip, listen, when talking about Miami, all the things you mentioned are true, right? You look at Mike McDaniels' offense, You take a look at how some of the ball distribution, I'll call it, with Tua Tagovailoa and getting the ball to Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, guys like that. Jonnu Smith, get the ball out of your hands quickly, get into the hands of your playmaker. Sounds very similar to what Quinn Ewers did at Texas. That's step one. Step two, he's not in a situation, right, where when you're a Shedeur Sanders or a Quinn Ewers, a 5th round pick, a 7th round pick, now it's not like, okay, if you're a 2nd rounder, we might not need you to start immediately, but we're looking at you to start by week 11, week 12, week 13, right? You're kind of viewed maybe not day 1 starter as if you're a 1st round pick, but we need you on the field sooner than later. I feel like Quinn is playing with house money, no pun intended, right? He gets to all the pressures off. And Chip, this is the point I really want to make here. Quinn Ewers was a quarterback at South Lake Carroll. That's a pressure cooker, right? Quinn Ewers is quarterback, University of Texas. That's a pressure cooker. When's the last time Quinn Ewers has had an opportunity just to sit down and learn and not be expected to do X, Y, or Z immediately? I would venture to say not since middle school, if that, right? So that to me is why I think him going in this round, that's the hidden win, Chip, that I feel like people aren't talking about. And you made the point that, listen, I'm not even talking about Quinn's familial history and, what he may come from in that sense. He's made a ton of money. It's not like Ewers is hurting for cash. Right? Oh, he needs another $3 million to go play at another school and be, jeopardize, sacrifice, whatever his UT legacy may be. I felt that was really understated by the people who felt that, oh, it's Quinn was the biggest loser because he didn't transfer. No, again, it's a layered conversation. But even just looking at his NFL landing spot, you're going to play 8. Well, I guess there's 17 games a year now. So either 8 or 9 games in South Florida. Great weather. That's a facility now where it's covered, so you can kind of manipulate some things with the rain and so on and so forth. Yes, in the AFC East, you may have to go to Buffalo or New York, or who am I missing there? Buffalo, New York, AFC East, Jets,
New England,
Bills, New England, and Patriots, right? New England, and so you may have some weather there, but that's a heck of a lot better than going to for example a Matt Golden being in Green Bay, right? Luckily Matt Golden has Jordan Love as his quarterback, so at least he should make out okay there, as opposed to our old friend AD Mitchell, Chip, who just wants a pass to come anywhere in his radius, right? So he's got a good landing spot there. But no, I think that is the hidden point with Quinn Ewers in Miami. For the first time in his adult life, or really his football life, he's not going to have to be expected to go in and lead us to a state title, lead us to a national championship. You just come in and learn.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I hope Gunnar Helm and I hope Cam Ward is the truth, and that Gunnar Helm and Cam Ward get to grow up together, become, I'm not going to say Mahomes Kelsey type combo, but heck.
Dating Taylor Swift isn't in Gunnar Helm's future?
Well, and then how about Andrew Makuba going to the world champion Philadelphia Eagles? So did Cam Williams, by the way. Cam Williams gets to learn from Lane Johnson, one of the best to ever do it. I love Andrew Makuba with the Philadelphia Eagles and that young surging defense. Good God. As an NFC fan of a team not named the Philadelphia Eagles, it is disconcerting how well Howie Roseman, who was once shoved into a basement office like Milton from Office Space by Chip Kelly, and is now probably the best front office man in the NFL. That's a nice landing spot for Andrew Makuba and Cam Williams. Jaden Blue to the Dallas Cowboys. Love the speed. Love the playmaking of Jaden Blue. Needs to put both arms around that football because he's got little hands, 8 1/4 inch hands, Eric. Just got to protect that football. But man, is that guy a playmaker? And so Cowboys fans, hey, you got a little spark there. Any other thoughts on the 12 Longhorns drafted, or even those who signed undrafted free agent deals? Gavin Holmes with the Lions, Jacob majors with the your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Eric?
I think that one, Chip, because in my mind, and listen, I am no NFL draft expert, but I look at Tampa Bay at center, what they did with Ryan Jensen. And Ryan Jensen was a third, fourth round pick. So, a little higher talent level, quote unquote. But even like a Robert Hainsey, who is their center now, Robert Hainsey was a late round guy, if not undrafted. That kind of fits their mold at center, right? So I thought that was a great landing spot for Jake Majors, getting a chance to learn by. And also one thing with Tampa at center, they have this guy at left tackle named Tristan Wirfs, pretty darn good, right? So that helps you there as well on that offensive line. I'll give you the one pick and I'll do it full circle here. Jahdae Barron. I wanted Jahdae Barron to go to my Buccaneers at 19 because, hear me out, I'm not saying that Jahdae can't change a defense on his own. But if you take a look at some of the things he's been able to do versatility-wise on defense, he had Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, Michael Taft, other talented guys around him that he could kind of use as a chess piece. I thought with Tampa, with an Antoine Winfield Jr., a Vita Vea, a Levante David. All right, you're putting him into an already talented defense, but going one pick later, going pick 20 to Denver, you get Pat Surtain on the other side. Pat Surtain, the second, I should say, on the other side. I think that could be just as good of a landing space there, right? Because then you at least have an established corner. You're not asking him to come in and be this number one corner day one. He gets to grow into that. So I thought, I thought Tampa, not just me being a Tampa homer, I thought it'd been a really good landing spot for him. Warm weather, talented players on defense, a defensive-minded coach in Todd Bowles, right? Who will certainly know how to use him. I thought it's just as solid of a landing spot, playing alongside Pat Surtain the second there in Denver.
Yeah, and Brandon Jones, former Longhorn, and PJ Locke the third, both at the safety position. I think PJ is backing up Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones tweeted out after Jahdae was selected by Denver, the Denver Longhorns. So he will have some familiar faces, support. Barron Sorrell goes to the Green Bay Packers. I think Barron Sorrell is going to be a solid pro. Hayden Connor goes to the Arizona Cardinals. And when you mention the Vernon Broughton, we mentioned that Bo Davis was the one who called him to let him know that he was going to be a New Orleans Saint. I think that's a great pick for the Saints, because Vernon Broughton, I thought, was underrated. And then Kelvin Banks also to the Saints. So you get two Longhorns going to New Orleans, and Silas Bolden, don't count him out, undrafted free agent with the Minnesota Vikings, because Silas Bolden, kick return, punt return, receiver, if you can make your bones on special teams, that's great. And Hayden Connor has played everywhere on the offensive line, and that versatility adds value. He's played center, he's played tackle, he's played guard. That adds value for those big fellas up front. All right, Eric. Texas baseball headed to Arkansas. You covered the A&M series, the most anticipated series in college baseball this season, because Jim Schlossnagle, one day after coaching the Aggies in a winner-take-all national championship final with Tennessee, left for the 40 acres and now wears the burnt orange and white. What'd you think of that series, Eric? 3 one-run games.
Jim Schlossnagle referred to his team after the Texas State game as being the grittiest he's ever coached. I think that just stands. It's going to feel like the same talking point, the same storyline. But this team overcomes the injury of Max Blue, who, as Chip reported, got a little update here. Of course, regular season, as we reported before, probably out of the question, but don't rule him out for the postseason. Maybe not SEC tournament, but definitely NCAA tournament. Feels like there's a possibility there, but they overcome Max Blue's injury. Jared Spencer goes down. They have to do some shuffling in the outfield, right? It doesn't matter. Ethan Mendoza We had to DH for a little bit. He gets banged up. This team finds ways to win. We're at the point in the year, Chip, in which whether this team is down a run or 2 runs, or they fall behind in a game by a run or 2 runs, you feel like they're going to find a way. You just feel like they're going to find a way. Ruger Riojas, I mean, that guy, you want to talk about the atmosphere of that Friday game, right? The first game of that series, all the hoopla, all the pomp and circumstance around it. You want to hand the ball to your guy. You know, he's got ice water running through his veins. Ruger Riojas continues to be that guy. Still don't know how he does it with Poker Face as his walk-up music. Not hating on Lady Gaga, just wouldn't be my choice. Wouldn't be my choice. But he gets the job done there. Saturday, you get an excellent start from Luke Harrison. You get help in the pen throughout the series. Andre Duplantier, Sunday, Chip. They got to figure out when Jared Spencer goes down, what are you going to do, right? They hand the ball to Jason Flores, a freshman. The moment may be a little too big for him. Just was putting guys on, walked 4 guys, walked 3 straight. You asked Dre to come on. 2 men on when Dre came in the second inning, extinguishes that fire, allows 2 runs, but an excellent 5 1/3, if memory serves, 5 2/3 from Andre Duplantier the second. You get timely hitting from guys. It's to me, it's just incredible. And even the game that you covered last night, Easton Winfield. Okay, I understand. Prairie View A&M's not good. Like there's not shying away from that.
11 and 32.
However, at least Easton Winfield, it's nice to see the bat come around, right? A kid who probably put a lot of pressure on himself. His aunt, I believe, is in the Hall of Honor, if memory serves me correct, or played softball here. So, there's a lot of a lineage here at UT. Probably put a lot of pressure on himself coming over from Louisiana Monroe. Nice to see him get the bat going. So all in all, I'll just say my takeaway from that series, Chip, is just how gritty this team is. You can never count him out. And Jim Schlossnagle managed to take the attention off of himself, put it back on this team, and they responded.
Yeah. And Jonah Williams should be good to go for the Arkansas series starting Thursday tonight. Jonah Williams missed the last 4 games with a hamstring. He, got the start in left field against Auburn and seized his opportunity. He's batting over 400, small sample size, but he's ready. And so look for Jonah Williams to be back in left field for the Arkansas series. And Jim Schlossnagle mentioned that Will Gasparino had been working through a shoulder thing. He called it a shoulder thing. He said he's fine, but it was a shoulder thing that was sort of affecting his ability to swing the bat, and he felt like it was a good sign that Gasparino hit an opposite field home run against Prairie View A&M as a signal that his shoulder thing is working itself out. So, big series against the Razorbacks. And it's funny how Schlossnagle keeps saying, we're going to have a time where we lose. He keeps there could be a situation where we don't win the series and then we'll find out. It's like you have 3 series left. You got Arkansas, you got Florida at home, and then you're at OU, and then you're in the postseason. So Schloss keeps saying, we got to be prepared when things get adverse. It's like you're 19-2 in SEC play. You're 5 games clear of the second place team, which is, again, phenomenal job by him, phenomenal job by these players to bond and just answer seemingly every call. Texas softball, tough weekend at OU. Look, that's a tough weekend for most everybody, playing the defending national champions. And, the question, the concern you have is they're leaning heavily on Tegan Kavan. I mean, she's starting Friday, she's starting Sunday, or game 1, game 3 of every series. And so if she struggles, and she did, then it seems to be a real blow to that Texas softball team. And I know Mike White's been wanting the bottom of the order to pick it up in terms of the hitting, because my God, Caden Henry, Mia Scott, Reese Atwood, they've been fantastic. We talked about the 1-run walk-off wins over LSU, and look, the postseason is a whole different situation, but it's a lot. It's a lot on Tegan Kavan pitching right now. All right, Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
Chip Brown, I'm always ready for America's favorite game, take it or leave it, even though I cannot find. There we go. There it is.
Hey, all right. Well, then let's do it.
All right.
Let's play some take it or leave it. Who's serving? Me?
You are serving to me, Chip.
All right. Take it or leave it. Number 1. Quinn Ewers should have taken the NIL money, Eric, to stay in college and play somewhere else in 2025. That seemed to be a real popular refrain from pundits all over the place over the past weekend. Take it or leave it, Eric.
Chip, this one's going to be quick for me. I wrote at length in 4 Downs on why I felt that Quinn Ewers made the right decision by going to the NFL draft. So I'll be quick. If it were about money and money only, he made the wrong decision. I don't believe, and Chip doesn't believe. I will speak for my esteemed colleague Chip Brown doesn't believe that it was just about money. It was about the fact that this young man has been groomed, Chip, and you know Curtis Ewers and that family much better than I, been groomed to be an NFL quarterback from the time he was 9, 10 years old. It was time to realize that dream. That's step 1. Step 2, he wanted to have a legacy at the University of Texas. Quinn Ewers from North Texas. Kid who wanted to be the quarterback at UT. You want to know what would jeopardize that? Going to be a vagabond, going to just be, a hired gun at West Virginia or insert, school, right, for $3-4 million. Okay. Would have jeopardized that. Quinn Ewers made the right decision because at the end of the day, what mattered to him was not money. It was beginning his NFL career and keeping his legacy intact as not just a Texas quarterback, Chip, one that I hope history will be much kinder to him than it is maybe right now as the one who helped guide Texas out of a very dark period of time in the program's history, Chip.
Yeah, that's very well said. And everybody needs to get over to horns247.com and read Eric Henry's 4 Downs column. It's one of the best pieces of content on the site every week. And very eloquent in talking about Quinn Ewers. And I've said this. It was not all Quinn Ewers' idea to take the $1.4 million from Panini out of high school and leave South Lake Carroll to go to Ohio State. I believe he did that for his family. And then from that point on, I think Quinn Ewers wanted to be in charge of his football. And he made it clear that he wanted to go to Texas. He went to Texas. And I think he went into the year thinking this would be his last year of college football. And it's unfortunate that he had the injuries, the oblique injury, the ankle injury, because when he was healthy, Eric, he was phenomenal at Alabama, at Michigan. That's the Quinn Ewers you hope gets to shine in the NFL, stays out of the injury tent, and gets to flourish the way we saw when he's healthy. All right, take it or leave it. Number 2, Eric.
Your biggest concern for Texas football post-spring is the number of positions that will be relying on transfers who aren't on campus yet. Take it or leave it, Chip.
I'll take this. I'll take this because we talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. There's a lot of chemistry that needs to be developed, with Emmett Mosley, the 5th, coming in, and Jack Endry's coming in from Cal, and on the defensive line, and Mason Shipley kicking, and so and guys coming back from injury. CJ Baxter, they're not transfers, but they didn't go through spring. So I'll take this, Eric. What say you?
I'm gonna leave it. I don't think it's my biggest concern. If they were picking up a bunch of transfers, Chip, again, I can't make it one episode without referring to my group of 5 days. It's not like you're picking up transfers who, were busts at their previous school, right? Or guys like, oh, it didn't work out. Maybe they need to drop down a level. No, more or less all the transfers that Texas has picked up outside of, the ones you place in this category are Hero Canoe, I guess Levon Johnson a little bit because he's still young. But outside of that, everyone else has a demonstrated history of producing. Even Travis Shaw last year, when it seemed like he finally got the knee healthy and the weight under control, started to produce, right? So no, we're talking about transfers who, while sure, maybe they haven't necessarily done anything at Texas, and it remains to see how they'll adjust to picking up the offense and defense. They're more or less, you have an idea of what they've been at the collegiate level. My concern continues to be quarterback. Again, I'll repeat what I said earlier. It's not saying that Arch Manning isn't going to be all the things that we think he can be, but you have to see it, right, Chip? We've seen plenty of quarterbacks over our time who've been 5-star recruits who, for whatever reason, didn't necessarily just reach that level of play, right? You can even put Quinn Ewers in this category. While I've made my feelings clear, I think there's a lot of circumstances with Quinn, injuries most notably. You saw the 5-star potential at Alabama, at Michigan, against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game against Oklahoma at times, I mean, not all the time, right? Again, not saying that Arch Manning's going to be that, but we still need to see more than 2-3 starts from him. So that's my thing, making sure Arch Manning is in the best position to actualize his potential.
All right. Take it or leave it. Number 3.
Take it or leave it, number 3. No, sorry. That's you. My apologies.
Texas baseball loses the weekend series at Arkansas. Take it or leave it.
Chip, I'm done picking against this team. I did it last week. Or not A&M. It was the series before, excuse me, that I picked against them. They swept that series, right? I'm forgetting which series that was right now. That wasn't LSU.
Auburn?
That was Auburn, yes. Done picking against this team. They're going to find a way to win 2 out of 3, at least, because, as Jim Schlossnagle said, grittiest team, and as I laid out, you just always feel that they will find a way. Someone will still, even Jaden Duplantier, CB, who was not hitting well coming into that series, he's starting to find a little rhythm. Go 1 for 3. Also, we don't need Jaden to be a 500 hitter. Just, hit 250. And he's starting to do that, right? Giving this team another dimension. So they'll find a guy. They'll find guys. They'll find a way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to leave this. Texas baseball, 19-2 in SEC play. If they take 2 of 3, they basically clinch the SEC regular season title. So that would be awesome. I mean, 5-game lead. And after this weekend, they'll have 6 games to play in SEC play. So big weekend in Fayetteville. That's a loaded place to play. Arkansas hates Texas. Jim Schlossnagle said a lot of our guys have no idea what they're in for heading to Fayetteville. So, but this team seems impervious to what's going on around them, and very, very impressive. All right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Flagship Podcast. Please like and subscribe to Horns247 YouTube channel. Feel free to give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcast. We greatly appreciate that. And get over to Horns247, become an annual member so that you get VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 Sports Network. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at Horns247.com. Stay safe and keep